Rain slid down the glass like it had nowhere else to go. Outside St. Gabriel Medical Center, the city glowed in wet neon. Red and blue from the ambulance bay smeared across the pavement, blending with the sodium yellow of streetlights. Seattle at midnight looked like it was underwater. Ava Mercer stepped out of the rain and into the fluorescent brightness of the emergency department. Her scrubs were still in her bag. She wore a dark hoodie jeans boots that squeaked on the tile. A small battered radio was hooked to her belt, the kind no one used anymore. It hissed softly with static, just loud enough for her to hear it. She paused in the entryway, shoulders drawing in as the automatic doors closed behind her. The sounds rolled over her all at once. Phones ringing, someone arguing with registration, a baby crying in pediatrics, a monitor alarm chirping from somewhere down the hall. She listened for half a second and sorted it without thinking. Normal noise. No screaming, no sprinting, no metal taste of panic in the air. Her body let out a breath she had not known she was holding. "Evening, Ava." The security guard at the front nodded. She gave him a faint smile, the practiced one that did not show teeth, and kept walking. The nurse's lounge was half-lit coffee pot already on. The room smelled like burnt caffeine and microwave leftovers. Ava left a damp trail behind her as she crossed the floor and set her bag on the locker bench. She opened her locker. On the inside of the metal door, hidden from anyone walking past, an old photograph was taped up. 8 people in dusty camouflage and medical vests standing in front of a helicopter. Someone had written Echo Team in black marker at the bottom. There were 7 red lines drawn across 7 faces. Hers was the only one left untouched. Ava's eyes stopped on the photo for a heartbeat. The muscles in her jaw tightened, then loosened again. She reached up and closed the locker before the memory could finish forming. She sat at the small table by the microwave and took out a black notebook. The cover was worn at the edges. Inside, the handwriting was all block letters, straight, evenly spaced like it had been measured with a ruler. She wrote the date and time in the corner. Underneath, she started a new line. Dept. ER shift nights, variables unknown. She paused, tapping the pen once against the paper. The radio at her belt crackled with a burst of static, then went quiet again. "Are you journaling or plotting a heist?" A young nurse slid into the chair across from her, setting a plastic container of pasta on the table. Mia, all bright eyes and messy ponytail inhaler visible in the side pocket of her bag. Ava closed the notebook halfway. "Keeping track," she said, "helps me remember who I forgot." Mia wrinkled her nose. "That is either poetic or deeply unsettling." Ava let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. "Long night. You should eat." Mia stabbed a fork into the pasta. "You always get here early," she said around a mouthful. "Like military early. You ever do time?" Ava's hand stilled on the notebook. "Something like that," she said. "You." "I'm late to everything." Mia shrugged. "Civilian to the bone." The overhead speaker popped softly. "Code Blue ICU," a voice announced. Somewhere above them, a team started moving. Ava slid the notebook back into her locker, changing without ceremony. The movements were efficient, not rushed. Every fold, every tie of a string had an order. When she walked into the main bay in full scrubs, the ER charge nurse lifted her chin. "You are early," the woman said. "Again?" "Habit," Ava replied. "Bad or good? Depends where you are." The shift rolled forward. A drunk with a head split open from a bar fight. An elderly woman whose chest pain was not quite bad enough to terrify the triage nurse, but close. A teenager with glass in his palm and his boyfriend hovering like a nervous shadow. Ava moved through it with quiet focus. She did not bark orders. She laid a hand on a shoulder, adjusted a tray set, a monitor alarm to a level that would not drive everyone mad. The residents gravitated toward Dr. Ward for answers. The nurses, when things got tight, gravitated toward her. Dr. Lucas Ward barreled in 20 minutes late with a paper cup of coffee and the look of someone who had fought traffic and lost. He was in his late 30s, jaw dark, with almost shaved blue scrubs under a fleece jacket. "Somebody killed the I-5 while I was gone," he asked no one in particular. "You are Shrek-level grumpy when you are late," Mia muttered. Ward scanned the room and found Ava restocking the crash cart. She was on one knee, counting syringes out loud under her breath. "You prep like we are about to invade something," he said, taking a sip of coffee and watching her hands. "Emergencies," Ava said, "are easier when your drawers are not empty." "I like to live dangerously," he said. "I have noticed." He caught the almost smile at the corner of her mouth. It surprised him every time. He had never seen her lose that calm, not even once. Before he could say more, the overhead radio system clicked on. "All units, this is dispatch. Multiple trauma inbound from Pier 46. Gang-related altercation. 6 confirmed victims, possible more. ETA 5 minutes. The ER shifted the way a body tenses before impact. The sitting stopped. The standing turned into moving. Gurneys were rolled into position, monitors switched on, trauma bays cleared. Voices overlapped. Someone cursed softly when a portable X-ray machine refused to cooperate. Ward straightened the coffee forgotten on the counter. "Mercer," he called, "I want you in Trauma 2 with me. Mia, take 3. Let's go." The ambulance sirens grew louder, that rising and falling wail that always cut through whatever else was happening. Ava stood near the doors, hands already gloved, eyes tracking the space out front. Rain was still coming down. Red lights strobed off the wet pavement. The first ambulance backed in, the bay doors flew open. Gunshot wound to the chest. Blood saturated the shirt, the stretcher, the paramedic's sleeves. "He lost pulses en route, got them back," the medic shouted. The second ambulance arrived, brakes squealing. Stab wound to the neck. The third, fourth, fifth. Each one carried its own storm. The ER became a maze. Orders flew. Someone yelled for more O-neg. A trauma surgeon was paged. There was the slap of wet footsteps, the smell of copper-sweet blood and antiseptic. Ava slid into place beside Ward in Trauma 2. Their patient was a young man, late 20s, belly swollen and tense under a soaked hoodie. His skin had the waxy look of someone losing the fight. "Stab wound to the abdomen," the paramedic recited. "Blood pressure dropping. He is crashing." Ward snapped on a fresh pair of gloves, already talking. "Get me suction. I need visualization." 2 large-bore IVs wide open. "Call surgery and tell them we are coming." A nurse shoved the suction tubing into his hand. He inserted it into the abdominal cavity. The machine gurgled, whined, then gave a long, sickening choke before going silent. The nurse checked the cord. The outlet hit the power switch again. Nothing. The backup ward said, not looking up. "There is a problem with the line," the nurse answered too fast. Biomed was supposed to fix it. Blood pooled faster. It spilled over the drapes, hitting the floor in heavy drops. The young man's eyes rolled up, the lids flickering. The monitor beeped higher, then stuttered. "Damn it," Ward hissed. He reached in with his hand blind. "I cannot see a thing in here." Ava stood at his shoulder watching. She could hear his breathing, hear the trembling in it that he was trying to hide. "Lucas," she said low, "step back. Not now, Mercer." His voice had a threat of panic he did not usually let anyone hear. The room seemed to tilt a fraction. "Step back," Ava repeated louder this time. "Give me 30 seconds. It was the way she said it. Not loud, not pleading. A command that had muscle memory tied to it like something out of a past life. Ward's eyes met hers. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might argue. Then he stepped aside. Everyone else gave her just enough space, as if they were not sure what they were doing but could not help themselves. Ava peeled off one glove that had torn at the thumb. She did not reach for another. She set her bare hand into the wound. The heat of the blood grabbed at her skin. It was slick thick, resisting her fingers. The smell came up sharp iron and gut, and something deeper that always lived in this part of the body. Her eyes half closed, not in panic but in focus. "Field map," her brain said. "Quadrants, landmarks." Her fingers moved under the torn muscle past loops of intestine. She pressed lightly, then harder, reading the terrain. Each pulse she felt was a direction. In her head, the ER light faded. For a second, there was another ceiling. A torn tent roof with dust in the air. Screams instead of monitors. A rotor wash overhead. She heard her own voice years younger. Hepatic artery. Follow the beat. Clamp or he dies. Here and now her fingertips found a jet of warmth that pushed against them with each fading heartbeat. The main source. Her hand locked down on it, firm, unwavering. "Pressure here," she said quietly. "I need a clamp." A nurse slapped a clamp into her free hand. Ava guided it under her fingers, still not looking up, counting silently. On 3, she lifted her hand just enough to slide the metal in place and close it. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. The monitor settled into a rhythm that did not set anyone's teeth on edge. Ava drew her hand back out. Blood coated her wrist to the forearm. The only sound in the room for a moment was the beeping of machines and the hiss of oxygen. Ward stared at her. "You located it by feel," he said. It was not a question. "I have done this before," Ava replied. His brow furrowed. "Where?" She shook her head once. "He needs surgery," she said. "Page them again. Tell them he is buying us his time." She turned toward the sink. The water hit her skin hot, then cooler as she adjusted the tap. Red swirled down the drain, circling the metal before disappearing. Mia watched from the foot of the bed, eyes wide. "You were a surgeon?" Mia asked, voice small. Ava stared at her own hands under the stream. "Just someone who has seen too much blood," she said. The ER doors opened. This time, it was not the rush of gurneys. 5 people in dark suits walked in with their jackets still wet from the rain. Their shoes squeaked on the tile, shoulder holsters were visible when they moved. One of them held an ID folder chest high. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," he called out. Conversation stalled. A paramedic swore under his breath. Somewhere a monitor alarm complained. "We need to speak with Captain Ava Mercer," the man said. His voice carried. The word hung in the air. "Captain," Mia repeated. She turned to Ava. "We do not have captains here. We have charge nurses." Ward looked from the agents to Ava. The math started arranging itself in his head, but he did not like any of the answers. Ava took a towel from the rack, drying her hands slowly. The paper scraped against the raw skin at the base of her thumb. She did not avert her eyes this time. She looked straight at the man in front, taking him in. He was taller than the other's hair, going at the temples, a beard 2 days old. There was rain on his shoulders and something like regret in his gaze. "Hello, Jonah," she said. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then was gone. "Captain," he replied, "we need you to come with us." Ward stepped between them on instinct. "Hold on," he said. "She is a nurse. She has patience. You do not just walk in here and drag my staff out." The agent, who was not Jonah, glanced at his badge, then at Ward, unimpressed. "We are not looking for a nurse," he said. "We are looking for Captain Mercer." Ava's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a scalpel. "They are not wrong, Doctor," she said. "I was Captain Mercer once." Was Ward repeated. "It is a long story," she said. The charge nurse appeared at Ward's elbow, reminding him with a look that there were still 6 other trauma patients breathing in the building. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and stepped back. Jonah gestured toward the hallway. "In private," he said. Ava followed him out of the main bay. The sounds of the ER faded a little as the door shut behind them, replaced by the hum of vending machines and the distant thunder of rain on the roof. Jonah pulled a tablet from inside his coat, tapped the screen, and held it up. The video was shaky, recorded on a phone in a hospital room somewhere. A man lay on a bed, his skin gray veins crawling dark beneath it. His eyes rolled white all around. Nurses in full protective gear worked around him. When he coughed, something black and thick splattered into a basin. It was not blood. It looked more like ink. Ava watched without blinking. "What is this?" she said. "Codename Leviathan," Jonah answered. "Someone brought it back." The radio at her hip crackled softly. Ava's hand drifted toward it almost without thinking. For a long moment, Ava said nothing. The video kept looping. The man on the screen writhed against the restraints as black fluid spilled from his mouth and nose, thick and shining under the harsh hospital light. His skin had a gray cast, as if someone had already started erasing him. Jonah tapped the screen to pause it. "We picked up the first case at a clinic in Sodo," he said. "Within 12 hours, we had 11 more. Different neighborhoods, no clear link. They were all here breathing the same air you walk through to get to work." Ava felt the corridor tilt under her feet. The air tasted different now, recycled, sharp with disinfectant, and something tighter like fear trying to hold still. "It is not a flu," she said. "No." "How fast does it move?" "First symptoms at about an hour after exposure. Full collapse under 6. Jonah lowered the tablet. "Dr. Shaw calls it a sprint, not a marathon." Ava stared past him as if she could see through the walls to the city outside, to the people in apartments under overpasses and packed bars glowing blue in the rain. "You named it Leviathan," she said. "That was not random." Jonah's jaw worked for a second. "You know why." She did. Her stomach already knew before her brain caught up. "The last time someone used this thing," she said slowly, "we were in Kandahar." Jonah nodded once. "And I burned it," Ava said. "Every vial, every sample, every freezer that held its name. I watched it melt." "You burned what you had," Jonah said. "We did not control all of it. That was never your call." A muscle jumped in her cheek. "Who is behind it?" she asked. "Who had enough to start again?" Jonah's eyes flicked to the tablet. He hesitated. "Ava." "What?" "If I tell you, you are in. There is no line after that. No going back to checking wristbands and refilling carts." She let the silence stretch. The radio at her hip hissed and clicked a thread of static that did not belong to this hospital hallway. "We both know there was never a line," she said. "Who?" Jonah swiped to a new image and held the screen up between them. It was a headshot from some official directory. A man in his 50s with iron gray hair and a careful mentor's smile. Lab coat, ID card clipped neat at the chest. Dr. Victor Cade. For a second, Ava was back in a tent under a different sun. Cade leaning over a field microscope, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt, teaching her how to tell one strain from another by the way it stained on the slide. His voice low and excited when he talked about potential, about thresholds. Her throat went dry. "Of course," she said. It came out almost as a breath. "We think he walked away with enough data and material to rebuild," Jonah said. "He has friends in the right offices. Nobody asked too many questions." Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands at her sides curled slightly as if they needed something to hold on to. "He abandoned my team," she said. "He took the last seat on the bird and told us to buy him time." "He did," Jonah said. Her eyes snapped to his, "And you did not stop him." "No," Jonah said. "He did not look away. I did not." The vending machine hummed behind them, offering candy bars and soda to anyone whose world was still small enough for sugar to fix it. "How many are infected now?" Ava asked. "Confirmed 12 labs, pending on others," Jonah answered. "But that number is old information. We are losing track. We do not know the exposure source yet." "Airborne." Maybe aerosolized in pockets, maybe fluid contact. We are still chasing the pattern. Ava nodded once more to herself, then to him. And you have no antidote, she said. No finished one, Jonah said. We have what was left of your field notes, but they are incomplete. A ghost of a bitter smile tugged at her mouth. Of course they are, she said, because the lab got hit. Because the lab got hit? Jonah agreed. You improvised the first antidote. You tested it in the field. You administered it under fire. There is no one else who has done that. And you want me to do it again, Ava said. He did not say yes. He did not need to. You have been hiding 3 years, Jonah said quietly. If this thing takes the city, it will not care that you want it out. She looked down at her hands. The skin at the base of her thumb where the glove had torn was pink and raw from scrubbing. A faint tremor ran through her fingers and stopped. I was not hiding, she said. I was trying to be small. How did that work out? She almost laughed at that, but the sound died before it started. Her radio crackled again. This time a thin, distant voice bled through, not clear enough to make out words. Just the cadence of someone calling to someone else. She thumbed the volume down until it faded. Where is your base? She asked. Temporary command near Harbor Island, Jonah said. We set up an isolation unit, a level 4 lab, everything we could grab in 12 hours, and shipped north from Fort Detrick. Level 4, Ava repeated. You are serious. You know how this plays, Jonah said. We contain it, or it eats everything. She inhaled slowly, let the air fill her chest. I have a shift, she said. You had, Jonah answered. She thought of the young man on the table, the one whose life balanced on the clamp she had placed. He would be on his way to surgery now. Someone else would carry it on. She thought of the boy sleeping in pediatrics with a stuffed dinosaur under his chin, the elderly woman waiting for her second troponin draw and hoping it was nothing, the drunk in the hallway singing badly to the ceiling tiles. She thought of all the lungs in this building pulling in air. I need to talk to my charge nurse, she said, and to Dr. Ward. Jonah stepped aside. You have 5 minutes. She went back into the main bay. The noise swallowed her. Monitors murmurs the squeak of stretcher wheels. Mia was resetting a bed hand, still stained faintly where the gloves had ended. You good? Mia asked. Yeah. Ava nodded. I have to go off shift. Mia blinked. You just started. I'm being pulled for something else, Ava said. The suits, Mia's voice dipped. What did you do, rob a bank? Always a possibility, Ava said. Cover my board. Stay close to Ward. He needs someone who pays attention. Mia squinted at her. You sound like you're not coming back for a bit. Ava did not answer that. She crossed to Ward, who was dictating notes into a handheld recorder, his eyes on a chart. We got him to surgery, he said before she could ask. Your guy. He has a chance. Good, Ava said. He glanced up and really saw her. You look like somebody told you the sky is falling, he said. What did the feds want? Her lips parted, then closed. Classified, she said. Ward scoffed. That is not a thing in my emergency department. It is today. He studied her, weighing stubbornness against concern. You are not actually going with them, he said. Ava, this is not a movie. They cannot just walk in here and claim you. They can, she said. And they did not have to try very hard. Who are you? He asked. It slipped out before he could catch it. Really? Because I saw what you did in there, and that is not a weekend workshop. She held his gaze. The fluorescent lights dug shadows under her eyes. I am someone who has done this before, she said. In a tent with less blood on the floor and more in the air. I do not know what that means. I know. She reached up, unclipped her ID badge, and placed it on the counter beside his coffee cup. The picture stared up at them, Ava, in slightly better lighting, with a neutral half-smile. You are quitting, he asked. I am stepping out, she said. If anyone asks, you tell them I had to go. That is not a plan. It is the only one I have. From the far end of the bay, the charge nurse called her name for a medication order. Ava did not turn. Do me a favor, she said to Ward. Check the suction lines. All of them. If this place ever sees another night like this, you like having them work. That is your last request. It is a practical one. He shook his head, frustration mingling with a respect he did not want to name. If you walk out with them, he said, I might not be able to help you again. She almost smiled. You already did, she said. You stepped back. She turned and walked away before he could find words to answer. In the locker room, she opened her locker and stared at the photograph inside. 8 faces, 7 red lines. The tape at the corners had started to curl. Her fingers hovered over it, then moved past to the shelf where the black notebook lay. She took it, slid it into her bag. She reached for the small silver pendant on the hook beside it, a pair of tiny wings on a chain, and fastened it around her neck. When she stepped back into the hall, Jonah was waiting. Ready, he asked. As I will ever be, she said. They walked out through the ambulance bay. The rain had picked up again, steady and thin, misting the pools of light under the lamps. The city smelled of wet concrete and exhaust and something metallic that only she seemed to taste. A dark SUV idled at the curb. Its interior light clicked on when the back door opened. Ava climbed in, Jonah followed. As the car pulled away from the hospital, she looked back once. Through the blur of water on the glass, she saw the sliding doors of the ER open and close, swallowing and releasing silhouettes. Her radio whispered against her hip. She turned the volume up just enough to hear the soft crackle. An old habit, a reminder. Echo team of memory said from somewhere far away, "Do you copy?" Her hand rested on the radio. "I hear you," she murmured. Outside, Seattle's lights gave way to darker stretches of industrial lots and the shapes of cranes against the sky. Harbor Island loomed ahead, lit in cold white. The temporary world Jonah had built waited there, full of containment tents and answers nobody liked. The SUV rolled past the last set of security gates and into a world that looked assembled in a hurry. Container trucks lined one side of the Harbor Island lot, their doors flung open to show racks of supplies. Big white tents bowed under the rain, their sides glowing pale gold from the lights inside. Generators hummed. Portable flood lamps threw hard shadows over pallets, water pooling in every low spot. Ava stepped out into the damp air, the smell of the harbor mixed with diesel and bleach. Agents moved through the space with purpose. Some wore standard suits, others already had on disposable gowns and masks. A military truck stood near the center canvas cover, dripping. "You built all this in 12 hours, she said. Parts of it were sitting in warehouses waiting for the right bad day. Jonah answered. "Come on. Dr. Shaw wants to brief you before you go in." They walked toward the largest tent, its entrance zipped halfway down. Inside, an isolation ward had been carved out with hanging plastic and rollaway beds. 15 cots all full. A nurse in full gear adjusted a drip at one bedside. The patient's eyes rolled sclera spider-webbed with red. Black streaks traced along his veins, crawling toward his chest. A monitor showed a heart rate that was too fast and too weak. "The first wave," Jonah said quietly. Ava took it in without letting her face move. The suits, the closed system, the hiss of filtered air. The patients struggling like caught fish. "They are all local," she asked. "Every one of them," a woman's voice said. Dr. Lila Shaw peeled off a pair of gloves near a bin, her hair tucked under a cap. The lines around her eyes made her younger face look older. She wore a badge that said CDC Liaison. "Lila," Jonah said, "this is Mercer." Ava offered a hand. Shaw did not take it, gesturing to the sink instead. "Wash," Shaw said, "then we talk." The water ran warmer here. Ava scrubbed again until the skin around her knuckles looked swollen. Shaw watched with a clinical eye. "Jonah tells me you worked with Cade," she said. "Worked for him," Ava corrected. "Once." Shaw nodded. "Then you know how tangled his mind is. He left a mess in our archives. Half-truths, half-protocols. Enough to tease, not enough to replicate what you did in the field." "You tried," Ava said. "We tried and we failed," Shaw said. "We bought time with isolation, but time is a closed account now." "How bad is it?" Ava asked. "Truth not press conference." Shaw pushed a stray glove deeper into the trash. 40 suspected cases across the metro area, she said. 23 confirmed Leviathan positives in the system right now. Those are the ones who actually made it to a hospital and got tagged. "And the others?" Ava asked. "Dead at home," Shaw said. "Or on a sidewalk. Or making a nurse somewhere in urgent care real confused." Jonah shifted his weight. "The modelers are nervous," he said. "They talk in curves now." Ava looked back at the line of beds. A woman in her early 30s lay rigid, chest rising in quick, shallow breaths. Her fingers clawed at the sheet, leaving streaks. "You brought me here to build a wall," Ava said, "not to stand in it." Shaw's gaze sharpened. "You built the first antidote in a war zone," she said. "No lab, no oversight. You wrote half your findings in the margins of weather reports and rations manifests. Those scribbles are all we had until now." Ava remembered sitting on an ammo crate, burning her own notes page by page, watching letters curl and vanish. That had felt righteous then. "What did you keep?" she asked. Shaw led them toward a metal door at the back of the tent, guarded by a man with a badge and a rifle. "Enough to know what you were aiming at," Shaw said. "Not enough to hit it again without you." The Level 4 lab was housed inside a prefabricated unit, boxy and plain from the outside. Inside it was all clean lines and overbright light. Glass steel white surfaces. A filtered air system hummed overhead, and every edge looked like it would punish a mistake. Ava's reflection stared back at her from a glass panel. Dark circles under her eyes' hair scraped back the silver wings at her throat, catching a bit of light. She suited up slowly under Shaw's guidance. Inner scrubs, then one sealed layer, then another. Gown, respirator, hood, gloves double-layered until her fingers felt clumsy. "Your vitals will display here," Shaw said, pointing to a monitor outside the sealed chamber. "If you spike too high or drop too low, we intervene." "From out here," Ava said. Yes, and if you cannot. Shaw's expression did not change. Then we document, she said, and we stop it from leaving the building. Ava adjusted the mask. The sound of her own breathing filled the space between her ears. Jonah stood just outside the secondary airlock. He looked larger from this side of the glass. You sure about this? He asked. No, Ava said. Open the door. The inner lab greeted her with cold and stainless surfaces. 2 biosafety cabinets, refrigerators with digital locks, racks of tubes neatly labeled. In the center on a wheeled cart, a cooler with a biohazard sticker. Patient samples, Shaw's voice crackled through the intercom. Early, mid-late stage, we pulled them as fast as we could. Do we have baseline? Ava asked. Leviathan original strain from Kandahar. Fragmented, Shaw said. We rebuilt a partial profile. Cade was careful even when he cared less. Ava opened the cooler. Tubes lay nestled in foam. Some held crimson, some an ugly, almost black. She held one up to the light. The dark sample clung to the glass in slow, thick swirls. She thought of ink, of something waiting for a page. Your original antidote targeted the binding protein, Shaw said. It blocked the cascade in the vascular system. That was the idea, Ava said. In theory, anyway. In practice, Shaw said it kept 40 soldiers from drowning in their own blood. That is more important than theory. Ava set the tube in the rack and began the mechanics. Pipettes, reagents, incubations. Her hands, once she adjusted to the layers of gloves, remembered the dance. Measure here, spin there, label, compare. Time shifted. It stopped belonging to minutes and became cycles. Centrifuge spin durations, incubation windows, the precise seconds it took for a color change to indicate success or failure. Outside the glass, someone brought in coffee. Jonah stayed in the same spot, hands in his pockets, watching the screen with her vitals climb and fall with exertion. Update, Shaw said over the line. We are at 31 confirmed. Seattle General just called. They have 3 patients who match the profile and no idea what they are dealing with. Ava did not look up from the scope. You take care of their lungs, she said. I will take care of what is in their blood. Her voice sounded flatter in her own ears. She was aware of her pulse tapping at her throat, a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the Leviathan. She transferred a sample of the darkest blood to a slide and stained it, then slid it under the microscope. The view sprang into focus with a small adjustment. Filaments like threads ran through the field, attaching to cells, wrapping, burrowing. She felt the old rage prick and stir. You are uglier than I remember, she said quietly. Her hands moved faster now. The first potential antidote combination failed. The structures under the scope remained busy, unconcerned. The second showed promise, a slight wavering in the filament's cohesion before they regrouped. Almost, she muttered. She tweaked the ratio, adjusted the exposure time. Outside, the numbers continued to climb. Leviathan positives at 38, Shaw reported. 2 new clusters, Capitol Hill and West Seattle. Jonah swore under his breath. One more run, Ava said. Feed me the original dosing notes. There are gaps, Shaw said. I know where my own handwriting trails off. Just give me the pieces you have. Lines of text appeared on the monitor in front of her, captured from scanned documents. Some were smudged, others half burned at the edges. Dosages scribbled, then crossed out. Short phrases. Heart rate spike, okay if plateau, watch kidneys. She remembered the dust in her nose, the weight of gear on her shoulders, the sound of gunfire in the distance as she had written those words the first time. She reconstructed the protocol from memory, and fragments adjusting for the city instead of the desert, for hospital beds instead of cots. The third formulation under the microscope did something different. The filaments thinned, lost their grip. Cells that had been wrapped began to shed the dark coating. Ava watched for a full minute, then 2. They did not regroup. Lila, she said, I think we have a candidate. Run confirmation, Shaw said at once. I am running it, Ava said, but you know the problem. Verification takes time, Shaw said. We do not have time to waste. They both said it at the same moment. Animal model. Shaw exhaled audibly through the speaker. We have mice in a holding unit, she said, but they are not prepped, and we are still waiting on the full ethics sign-off. Ethics, Ava repeated. Leviathan did not sign anything. Her head throbbed under the hood. She pressed 2 fingers to the spot between her eyes for a second. How long for a basic confirmation, she asked. 6 hours if everything behaves, Shaw said. 6 hours, 38 confirmed cases and rising. In 6 hours, that number could double or triple. The models Jonah had not wanted to talk about would be less like curves and more like walls. A siren sounded faintly outside the building. Through the small window, Ava saw flashers bouncing off wet metal, another bus of patients or another agency or something else. Her hands hovered over the vials, the clear one glowing faintly under the lab light, the dark ones that carried the thing she hated. Options, Jonah said, as if he could force more of them into existence just by asking for the plural. Wait, Shaw said. Test hope? The other one? Jonah asked. Shaw did not answer. They both looked at Ava through the glass. She could feel their eyes even without seeing them. You built it to work fast, Shaw said slowly. You wrote that it needed a host to fully activate. In Kandahar, you pushed the dosing envelope. Ava looked again at the vials, then at her own hand, gloved in white under the lab light. If I wait 6 hours, she said, we lose more than we save. If you shortcut this, you might kill yourself, Shaw said. Or worse. We do not know what the compound will do without a proper buffer. Ava laughed once, a small, harsh sound. You think I had a buffer the first time, she said. Shaw was silent. Jonah stepped closer to the glass, as if that might make a difference. Ava, he said. She met his eyes through the mask. For a second, everything was quiet. Even the hum of the filters seemed to drop away. Seal the lab, she said. Shaw's voice sharpened. What are you doing? Lock it, Ava repeated. If my vitals flatline and stay there, you do not open this door. You flood the room, you burn it down, whatever your protocol says. You do not come in. You do not get to make that call, Shaw snapped. I am already in the room, Ava said. Looks like I do. She drew up a dose of the clear compound. The syringe in her hand felt lighter than it should. Ava, Jonah said again. There was no command in it now, only something harder to name. You dragged me back in, she said. Let me do the thing you dragged me for. She turned her face toward Shaw's intercom. If this works, she said, you will have 10 minutes head start on replication before my blood finishes the job. And if it fails, Shaw asked. Then you have one fewer problem to manage, Ava said. She rolled up the sleeve of her underlayer. The cool air in the lab settled on the bare skin of her inner arm. A line of old needle marks ghosted under the surface. Her hand did not shake when she slid the needle in. The burn of the compound traveled up her vein like liquid fire. She gritted her teeth and pressed the plunger slowly, watching the last of the clear solution vanish. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world narrowed. Her heart slammed against her ribs. A roar filled her ears. The lab lights brightened until they hurt to look at. Her breath came short and sharp as if the air had thickened. She grabbed the edge of the bench with both hands. The room tilted. Somewhere a monitor alarm began to wail. On the other side of the glass, Shaw's voice cut in, clipped and fast. Heart rate 180 and climbing. Blood pressure spiking. She is seizing. Ava tried to speak and tasted copper. Her legs gave out. She hit the floor hard. The impact barely registered behind the storm in her veins. Images crashed into her. Sand under her boots. A man screaming her name in a language she did not speak. The whine of a rotor blade too close. The smell of burning tents. Her chest clenched. The roar in her ears cut out. The monitor for one long second went flat. The flat line held like a held breath. On the far side of the glass, Jonah moved before he thought. His hand hit the door release. The lock stayed red. Open it, he snapped. Shaw caught his arm. You hit that panel again, I have you removed from this site. She is down, Jonah said. She's not a test subject. Shaw did not look at him. Her eyes were on the monitor that showed Ava on the floor suit, crumpled hood tilted at an angle. Count, she said to the tech beside her. 1 second, the tech whispered. 2, 3. The flat line hummed steady and indifferent. 4, 5. The room felt smaller. Jonah could hear his own pulse banging against the inside of his skull. On 6, the monitor blipped. It was a small sound, almost nothing, a single sharp note. Then another. The line jumped, dipped, then began to draw peaks again. Heart rate 60, the tech breathed. 70, stabilizing. A tremor passed through Ava's body. Her gloved hand twitched against the tile. Jonah pressed his palms flat to the glass. Come on, he said under his breath. Come on, Mercer. Inside the lab, Ava's eyes snapped open. The lights still seemed too bright, but now they were something she could manage. Her lungs dragged in a breath that felt like breaking through a surface of thick water into air. Everything sounded close. The hum of the filters had a pitch now, not just noise. Someone outside shifted their weight and their shoes squeaked. A coffee cup set down on a metal tray rang softer than it should have, but she heard it. I am still here, she said. Her voice rasped inside the mask. She pushed herself up to sitting. Her muscles obeyed with a slight delay, but they obeyed. The room swam once, then steadied. Ava. Shaw's voice came through the intercom thinner now. Talk to me. Any chest pain, visual changes. I have a headache, Ava said, and my everything hurts. She looked at the rack of vials, the microscope, the notes that still glowed on the screen. The compound in the syringe was gone somewhere in the maze of her own veins. We need to know if it did anything besides trying to kill you, Shaw said. Ava pulled herself to her feet, using the bench for balance. She took a breath and waited for the tilt. It did not come. Give me a fresh sample, she said. A small unit in the wall dispensed a sterile kit. She swabbed the inside of her arm where the needle had gone in, then drew a vial of her own blood. The fluid was a deep red, nothing strange about it to the naked eye. She loaded it into the analyzer and ran the panel. Numbers began to scroll. markers for immune response clotting factors, oxygen carrying capacity. Some rose higher than standard, others dipped just below the usual range, then settled inside acceptable limits. Shaw, she said, look at the neutralization markers. Shaw leaned closer to the external screen, her eyes widened. The binding proteins, she whispered. They are saturated. Whatever is in you is blocking the receptor sites. Ava moved to the cooler, took one of the Leviathan positive samples and introduced a measured amount into a small chamber with a drop of her own blood. Under the scope, the dark filaments tried to attach and wrap. They hit an invisible wall instead. They slid thinned, then broke apart. Cells that had been targets stayed clear. She watched it happen twice more to be sure her eyes were not lying. It works, she said quietly. Jonah exhaled so hard it fogged the glass for a second. Say that again, Shaw said, as if she needed the words to be real. It works, Ava repeated. We have a functional antidote. It is present and active in my blood. Shaw straightened, already moving into decisions. Draw larger volume, she said. We can extract the active serum and start replication right now. We use cell culture to scale up. We adjust dosage for non-suicidal administration. Glad that part made the list, Ava muttered. The next hour blurred into procedure. Ava sat while a tech double-gloved and careful drew multiple vials from her veins and passed them through a pass-through chamber. Machines began to spin, separate analyze. Protocols that had been half theoretical came to life with hurried hands. Outside the lab, the isolation tent shifted in tone. Nurses hung bags of the new serum on IV poles. The first patients to receive the infused antidote shook violently for a few minutes, then began to ease. The black streaks in their veins faded, replaced by healthier color. The numbers on the board changed direction. Fewer new red pins, more markers for stabilized. By the time the immediate crisis in Seattle started to bend toward control, Ava's body ached with fatigue. Her mind floated a few steps behind events. Shaw came to the glass again, eyes rimmed with red from no sleep. We are getting responses, she said. Not everyone will make it, but most of those under 6 hours exposure are turning around. Ava nodded once. Relief felt dangerous and soft in her chest. You should be on a monitor bed, Shaw added. You just turned yourself into a pharmacology experiment. I have been worse, Ava said. That is not comforting. I was not trying to be. Jonah appeared at Shaw's shoulder. He looked like someone had dragged him through a storm and set him back upright. City Emergency Management just confirmed, he said. No sign of spread beyond the initial clusters. We got it in the same day. Leviathan likes speed, Ava said. It also burns itself out if it does not find enough new hosts. You bought it fewer doors to walk through. Jonah studied her face. You look like you are about to tip over, he said. I will sit, she said, not lie down. That is a control issue. That is survival, she answered. He let that go. We have another problem, Jonah said. Ava rubbed at the bridge of her nose through the mask. Of course we do, she said. Which one is this? Intelligence pulled a data burst from an encrypted channel tied to Cade, Jonah said. A lab outside Tacoma registered to a shell company. Activity spike right before the first Leviathan case hit. So he is close, Ava said. Her hand dropped away from her face. He is closer than I like, Jonah said. And if he walks, this will not be the last time we do this. Shaw interjected. She is not cleared for fieldwork. She just died and came back. I want her in observation, not in a truck. Ava met Jonah's eyes. Is he alone, she asked. Unknown, Jonah said. The satellite images show a lot of concrete and not much else. She thought of Cade's face on the tablet, of his careful smile, of the way he had once said the word evolution like a prayer. You are taking a team, Ava said. You know his patterns. He keeps a failsafe. Which is why you are too valuable to risk, Shaw cut in. Ava looked at the lab around her, at the machines that now knew the shape of her blood, at the vials labeled with her ID. If Cade gets out, she said, none of that matters. Shaw crossed her arms. Your autonomic system is still recalibrating. We do not know the long-term impact of the compound. I know what the short-term impact of leaving him breathing is, Ava said. Jonah watched the argument move back and forth. He will expect her, he said finally. He will have planned for everyone but her. Or he will have planned only for her. Either way, she understands the way he thinks better than anyone else we have. That is not a medical clearance, Shaw said. No, Jonah said. It is an operational one. Ava took that as victory, not triumph, just a small shift in footing. I will need gear, she said. Body armor that fits a rifle I can trust, and someone who knows Tacoma industrial parks at night. We have all of that, Jonah said, and a ride waiting. Shaw shook her head, unhappy but aware of the limits of her authority. If you start seizing in a stairwell, she said, do not expect me to say I told you so. I will be too busy trying to keep you alive. I will take that under advisement, Ava said. They cleared her from the lab with a protocol that felt more ceremonial than practical. Decontamination shower, bleach rinse, new scrubs. The pendant with silver wings went back around her neck, resting against a chest that still felt wired. In a small briefing room set up in one of the containers, Jonah unfolded a map on the table. Lines of highway, a cluster of warehouses near the docks, an old water treatment facility marked with a circle. Facility sits under this structure, he said. Vent stacks here and here, one main entrance at ground, 2 service tunnels. We go in low and coordinated, no big show. We want him alive if possible. Ava ran her finger along the tunnels. He built this into the blueprint, she said. He likes exits. He will have choked points where he can see you before you see him. Then you can point them out before we step into them, Jonah said. She nodded. Any word on his security detail, she asked. Nothing obvious, Jonah said. No heavy traffic, no thermal spikes that would indicate a private army. He might be overconfident or just very good at hiding. Cade would rather spend money on filtration units than on mercenaries, Ava said. He thinks petri dishes are more reliable than people. Jonah folded the map. Gear up, he said. We move in 20. The tactical van smelled of oil and old canvas. Ava checked the rifle she had been handed, feeling the weight, the balance. Muscle memory slotted into place. The magazine locked in with a click that felt like a language she had not spoken in years. Across from her, a young agent watched her with open curiosity. You have done this before, he said. A few times, Ava answered. You were really just a nurse at St. Gabriel, he said. Everybody keeps saying that. She pulled the strap of her vest tighter. No one is just anything, she said. The van rolled to a stop on a side street near the target. The motor cut. For a moment, the only sound inside was the soft clink of gear and the quiet clearing of a throat. Jonah touched his earpiece. Bravo team in position, he asked. A reply came back crackling and low set. Charlie team, ready. Jonah looked at Ava. You walk behind me, he said. You do not try to clear rooms on your own. You are here for Cade, not for heroics. I am here so we do not have to do this again, she said. They stepped out into the night. Tacoma's industrial district smelled of rain and metal. Sodium lights cast everything in a dull amber. The building that held Cade's lab looked like any other neglected structure. Streaks of rust, boarded windows, a locked door that had been opened and closed by people who did not care about subtlety. The team breached with the quiet violence of professionals. Door-forced corners taking calls of clear moving through the dark. Inside, the front rooms were empty. Old machinery stood in the shadows, wrapped in dust and cobweb. A stairwell led down to a lower level. The air grew colder as they descended. The quality of the concrete changed from rough to smooth, from old to relatively new. At the bottom, a steel door waited. It was already open a hand's width. Jonah signaled. 2 agents flanked the entrance guns ready. He nodded once and pushed the door wider. Light spilled out, clean and white. A lab stretched before them. Not as advanced as the one on Harbor Island, but polished and functional. Benches with equipment, refrigerators, monitors glowing with data, the smell of disinfectant and something chemical. At the center of the room, Victor Cade stood by a workstation, hands clasped loosely behind his back. He looked exactly like his photograph and nothing like it at all. The same gray hair, the same kind smile. The eyes were different, sharper, brighter. Welcome, he said. You moved faster than most committees are usually capable of. I am impressed. The team fanned out weapons trained on him. Victor Cade, Jonah said. You are under arrest for bioterrorism, unlawful deployment of a weaponized pathogen, and murder. Cade barely glanced at him, his gaze fixed on Ava instead. You look tired, he said. Does it feel heavy carrying a whole city in your bloodstream? Ava lifted her rifle a fraction higher. You did this, she said. The words were flat. You took Leviathan out of the grave. I revived a possibility, Cade said. You always thought too small about it. You killed people, she said. I selected for a new set of traits, he answered. He took a small step closer as far as Jonah's hand signal would allow. I watched your vitals from the data leak, Cade said. I know what that serum did inside you. You are not the same woman who walked into that lab. Ava's jaw tightened. I am still human, she said. Cade smiled, and this time it was almost kind. Your heart stopped, he said. Then it started again stronger. Your sensory response is heightened. Your reflexes, I would wager, are sharper than your peers. That is not an illness. That is progress. It is a scar, she said. You are the first proof of concept, Cade said. A walking answer to a question the rest of us have barely managed to form. He turned his head slightly, addressing Jonah without taking his eyes off Ava. They are not going to let her go, he said. You know that. You saw the same briefings I did in different rooms. She is not a person to them anymore. She is a resource, a sample on legs. A silence spread through the room. The agents did not lower their guns, but there was a tension in their shoulders that had not been there before. Ava took a step forward. You are done talking, she said. This lab is seized. You are coming with us. Cade's gaze flicked to the bench beside him. His hand moved faster than it should have for a man his age. He grabbed a small vial from a rack, holding it between thumb and forefinger. Am I, he asked, or do I still have one thing you cannot afford to lose? The liquid inside the vial looked clear. The label carried a code, nothing more. Drop it, Jonah said, right now. If I cannot continue my work, Cade said no one will. All it takes is this on the floor in the ventilation. Your antidote will not reach everyone in time. His fingers tightened on the glass. Ava watched the angle of his wrist, the way his knuckles shifted. Her thoughts went very still. The crack of Jonah's shot echoed off the lab walls. Cade jerked. The vial slipped from his grasp and fell. It hit the floor and shattered, scattering empty shards across the tile. Nothing hissed, no dark cloud bloomed. Ava's eyes flicked from the shards to Cade. Empty, she said. Cade's hand went to the spreading red stain on his chest. He sank back against the bench, then slid to the floor, leaving a streak. He laughed once, a dry sound. You still do not understand, he said, breath rattling. The weapon is not in a bottle anymore. It is in you. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. His eyes, even as the light dimmed in them, stayed on Ava's face. They will come, he said. Not for me, for what you carry. His head tipped sideways, his chest stilled. The lab was suddenly very quiet. Ava stood over him, her rifle pointed at a man who no longer needed aiming at. Behind her, someone muttered into a radio, calling in status. Another agent moved to secure the room. Jonah stepped up beside her. You all right? He asked. No, she said, but I am standing. She looked around at the equipment, the notes, the machines that had turned ideas into something that could blacken veins. Get forensics in here, Jonah said to the team. No one touches anything they do not have to. He turned to Ava again. He was trying to rattle you, Jonah said. That is what he does. He finds the fault line and presses. He did not have to press hard, Ava said. She could still feel the serum moving in her system. Not as a separate thing, but as a shift. A calibration. The world felt sharp-edged and in focus. The air, the lights, even the quiet hum of the refrigeration units had a presence. In the back of her mind, Cade's words lodged like grit. They are not going to let her go. She knew he was manipulative. She also knew he had read people and institutions his entire life and rarely been wrong. Jonah seemed to read some of that on her face. We go back, he said. We give our statements. We hand this place to the people with suits and clearances. That is all. Ava nodded slowly. Outside, the night pressed against the small lab windows. Somewhere overhead, the first hint of dawn began to touch the sky gray, pushing it black. 2 days later, the air smelled like polish and recycled cool. The conference room inside the Pentagon had no windows. The walls were beige, the carpet gray, the lighting a soft glare that flattened everyone into the same shade. A long table took up most of the space, lined with uniforms and suits. Ava sat near one end in a borrowed dress uniform that did not quite fit her shoulders. The ribbons on her chest felt heavier than their material allowed. The silver wings at her throat were the only thing she had chosen herself. Someone at the far end of the table droned through commendations. Phrases like decisive action and above and beyond floated past. There was polite applause. A camera on a tripod recorded for a record that would never be released. Jonah sat 3 chairs down in a dark suit that had seen enough briefings to know when to pretend to be respectful. He clapped when everyone else did, his expression carefully neutral. A colonel read from a sheet. Captain Ava Mercer, for your role in the identification and neutralization of the biological threat designated Leviathan within the Seattle metropolitan area, you are hereby commended with the Defense Superior Service Medal. He walked toward her with the small case in hand. She stood as ordered. The colonel pinned the medal under her existing row with precise fingers. Thank you for your service, Captain, he said softly. Ava met his eyes for a second and saw only procedure there. She nodded and sat back down. The ceremony wrapped in under 30 minutes. A general shook her hand. A civilian official from Homeland Security offered a bland smile and a line about how grateful the nation was. Coffee was poured that no one really wanted. Donuts sweated on a tray in the corner. Then someone announced, we will take a short break before the closed session, and the few people who did not have clearance filtered out. The door closed with a soft click. The room changed flavor. The general at the head of the table removed his reading glasses and set them carefully beside his folder. All right, he said. Let us talk about the part that does not go on medals. Screens at the far end came to life. Slides flicked up. Charts. A photograph of Ava's bloodwork, stripped of her name, labeled only with an alphanumeric code. Subject shows permanent integration of the antidote compound into her system, a scientist in a lab coat reported. Her serum demonstrates ongoing neutralizing activity against Leviathan analogs. Ava watched herself be turned into data. Lines, numbers, bullet points. She is stable, someone asked. For now, the scientist said, but this is uncharted territory. The potential applications are significant. The word hung there, applications. The general folded his hands. Doctor, from a purely technical standpoint, could this be extracted and replicated without her ongoing presence? The scientist hesitated. In theory, yes, he said. In practice, we would need access to her for an extended period. Multiple sampling-controlled trials. Longitudinal study. How extended, a civilian from the Department of Defense asked. Months at minimum, the scientist said. Years would be better. Ava sat very still. The air in the room seemed to sharpen around her. And during that time, the general asked, risk profile. For her, the scientist asked. The general said nothing. The silence answered for him. We would do our best to minimize harm, the scientist said, adjusting his glasses. But we are in unknown biological space. There are no guarantees. A woman from an intelligence branch leaned forward. She is a critical asset, she said. Leviathan is neutralized for now, but the underlying approach could be adapted. We have to assume foreign actors will try. We cannot allow the only successful countermeasure to walk out of here as a private citizen. Jonah cleared his throat. With respect, he said, she is not a countermeasure. She is a person. A small murmur went around the table, not agreement. The distinction is meaningful ethically, the intelligence officer said. It is less so strategically. The general turned his gaze to Jonah. Agent Reddick, he said, you coordinated on the ground. You know the scale of what was prevented. Picture the opposite outcome. Tell me you are comfortable with that risk. Jonah's jaw tightened. I am not, he said. I am also not comfortable with turning the woman who made that prevention possible into a lab sample. We are not talking about indefinite detention in a black site, the general said. Jonah gave him a look. Then what are we talking about, he asked. Protective custody, the general said. Secured facilities, full medical support, controlled contact. She would be treated well. She would be contributing. You are talking about locking her up, Jonah said. You are just using better words. The general picked up his glasses again, turning them between his fingers. We are charged with defending this country, he said. Sometimes that means making use of every tool we have. Tool. The word landed heavy. Ava felt it in the same place she had felt Cade's voice in the lab. She stood up. The motion drew every eye. Captain Mercer, the general said, you are dismissed until we conclude this portion. She kept her voice level. If you are going to discuss my status, she said, you can do it while I am in the room. Or you can do it without pretending this is about consent. The general's mouth flattened. We have not issued an order yet, he said. You will, she said. You already decided. The rest is finding the language that lets you sleep. They stared at each other across the table. After a beat, he shifted his attention away from her, a move that said more than any direct answer. That will be all for now, Captain, he said. You are free to return to your quarters. We will contact you when your presence is required again. A security officer by the door glanced between Ava and the general, waiting to see if he needed to escort her. The general did not say that out loud. He did not have to. Ava picked up her cap from the table and left the room. The corridor outside was bright and cold. Her footsteps made a dull sound on the carpet. She could feel the low buzz of distant printers, the muted conversations through office doors. Her phone vibrated in her hand. One new message from an unknown number routed through layers that only a handful of people knew. Need to talk, not in there. Jonah. She stepped into a restroom, checked the stalls out of habit, then answered. You are on a tight clock, Jonah said without preamble. His voice came through the speaker low and fast. They are drafting the order now. They will call it evaluation. They will wrap it in security language. It is a cage. I figured, Ava said. I tried the fairness argument, Jonah said. The hero argument. None of it moved anyone. You were never good at speeches, she said. He huffed a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. You are going to have to disappear, he said. I already did, she said. There was a brief, sharp silence. You planned for this, he said. Of course I did, she said. Cade read the room before he died. I read it while they were pinning medals on me. You cannot just drop off the grid, Jonah said. Not with what they have on you in files. I can make it harder to follow, she said. That is all I need. Ava, he said. There was more in it this time. Regret, admiration, anger on her behalf. You have your job, she said. I have mine. They will come after me too, he said, for helping you. She leaned back against the cool tile of the wall. So do what you always do, she said. Make a choice and live with it. There was a small pause. I owe you one, he said. You owed me from Kandahar, she said. Consider it even. She hung up before he could say anything else. By the time the meeting inside the conference room ended, and a junior officer was sent to bring her back, the guest room assigned to Ava in the visiting officer's quarters was empty. The bed was made. The duffel she had been given for travel was gone. The small amenities kit on the dresser sat untouched. The only sign she had been there at all was a folded set of hospital scrubs on the chair neatly stacked. In Seattle, her apartment above the tracks did not wait. The landlord found the keys in a plain envelope slid under the office door, along with 2 months' rent and a note that said simply, "Thank you for the quiet." Inside the apartment, drawers were emptied. The closet held only hangers. The radio was gone from the kitchen counter. The photograph of the Echo team had been taken down, leaving 4 faint squares of lighter paint where tape had once covered the wall. A bus pulled away from a downtown station heading south. In a window seat, a woman in a gray hoodie watched the city slide by. Her hair was tucked under a cap. The silver wings at her throat were hidden under fabric. She had a small backpack and a duffel. No uniform, no badge. Her hands rested on her knees. The veins there pulsed steady. On the road and in the air over the next weeks, names shifted. Clinic badges carried different letters. Border checkpoints saw different passports. The places stayed real enough. A church basement in Fresno turned into a free clinic 3 nights a week. Ava, under another name, set broken fingers, drained abscesses, taught volunteers how to improvise slings from torn t-shirts. A storm tore through a small town in Kansas, peeling roofs off houses and tossing cars into ditches. A woman in borrowed rain gear showed up with a medical kit, stayed until the last of the injured were stabilized, then left before the local paper's photographer arrived. In a refugee shelter in southern Texas, she worked with a nun whose Spanish was better than hers, treating fever and dehydration until dawn dulled the fluorescent lights. No one asked many questions. People in those places tended to look more at what a pair of hands could do than where they came from. Back in Washington, Jonah stood on the sidewalk outside a federal building, a cardboard box of his own in his arms. The contents were standard for someone who had been nudged out rather than thrown. A plant that was mostly dead, a framed commendation, a coffee mug with a crack in the side. He set the box on the passenger seat of his car and rested his forehead against the steering wheel for a moment. Then he sat up, started the engine, and drove not toward home but toward a different kind of office. The sign on the door of the small space he rented a week later read, "Mercer Emergency Aid" on a temporary placard. The name felt like both an admission and a shield. Inside there were folding tables, a whiteboard, and 2 cheap chairs. A stack of grant applications sat in the center like a thin fort. On the wall he pinned a printed photo of a caduceus with stylized wings. He stared at it for a while, then picked up a pen and wrote under it in block letters, "Field First." The first donations were small. A retired paramedic mailed in $50 and a note. A community group offered storage space. Someone from his old bureau days slid an anonymous check into the account. Months later, in the middle of a long day, trying to turn goodwill into something that could actually put medics on planes, Jonah received a plain brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a single black notebook. The handwriting on the first page was all block letters, straight and even. "For whoever runs toward the siren instead of away from it." He flipped through. Triage algorithms written from memory, not manuals. Diagrams for using belts as tourniquets when the official ones ran out. Notes on how long someone could stay under dirty floodwater before an airway became a lost cause. Protocols for handling suspected bioagents in places with no labs. Every page carried a voice he recognized. He set the notebook in the center of the table beside the whiteboard and reached for the phone. There were organizations that could use this. Doctors in field tents, nurses in places where power went out more than it stayed on. He started calling. The first time anyone outside a disaster zone heard the name Mercer Protocols was in a PDF that did not have an author. It showed up in the inbox of a logistics officer for a medical NGO as an attachment from a contact in Jordan. From there, it was forwarded to a surgeon in Lagos, a field nurse in Haiti, a coordinator in Manila. Within a month, people in tents and prefab clinics across 3 continents had printed copies, the edges already softened by fingers and sweat. The pages were dense but practical. Flowcharts sketched in thick pen, lists of supplies sorted by urgency, then by likelihood of being stolen first. Margins filled with notes like, "If no sterile gauze, boil clean cloth for 10 minutes dry in sun, if you have to use anyway." No one knew who had written it. The only hint was a small line on the inside cover. Mercer Protocols version 1.0. In a refugee camp outside Gaziantep, a young doctor worked his way through the document by the light of a single bulb. When a child came in limp and gray from contaminated water, he remembered a line from the protocols about how long to keep pushing fluid before calling it. He kept pushing. The child lived. He looked at the printed name again and wondered who Mercer was, and why they sounded like they had been everywhere he was about to be. The stories started coming after that. They never agreed on the details. In one version, she appeared in a flooded village outside Dhaka, ankle-deep in brown water bags of saline looped around her shoulders, barking gentle orders in accented English. In another, she walked into a field hospital in Mogadishu during a lull in fighting, read the room once, and began reorganizing the entire triage flow with a piece of charcoal on a wall. Someone shot a shaky video in a camp in southern Turkey. The clip began in chaos, phone turned on its side as people shouted in 3 languages. A girl of 8 lay on a blanket, lips blue chest barely moving. A woman in a white mask and plain scrubs knelt beside her, hands already moving. The camera zoomed in too far and blurred, then caught the woman's eyes for a second. They were calm in a way that did not match the noise around her. She performed compressions counted under her breath, tilted the girl's head. Sealed her mouth over the child's. When the girl coughed, water sprang, someone cried out. The woman rolled her into recovery position, checked her airway, then sat back on her heels for a moment, shoulders falling. Someone in the background asked her name. The audio caught only a fragment. Just helping. The clip hit, a social feed bounced, multiplied. Comments stacked under it in a dozen languages. Some called her an angel. Some called her insane. A few doctors watched the hand placement, the timing, and recognized both training and something beyond standard. A news outlet picked it up, running a segment about a mysterious medic who appeared in crisis zones. They titled it The Ghost Nurse. The name stuck whether Ava liked it or not. She did not watch the segment. She was busy in a tent near a riverbank in Vietnam, listening to rain on canvas, while she stitched a cut on a fisherman's forearm. The radio on the table behind her whispered static and half-caught voices. "Hold still," she said in slow, careful Vietnamese. The man nodded, eyes fixed on the needle and thread. Back in Seattle, St. Gabriel's main corridor gained a new frame photograph. It was not the kind that made it into medical journals. Someone had taken it on a phone years before, catching Ava half-turned, holding a chart light bouncing off her hair. She looked annoyed at being interrupted, but the corners of her mouth were just starting to lift. Underneath a small plaque read, "In recognition of Ava Mercer RN for reminding us that impossible is a diagnosis, not a verdict." Dr. Lucas Ward stood in front of the photo one afternoon in between rounds, coffee cooling in his hand. A group of residents gathered, waiting for him to start the teaching session. He gestured toward the picture. "She worked nights," he said, "checked suction lines religiously, argued with me when it mattered, ignored me when it mattered more." A few of the residents smiled. "There is a story going around," one of them said, "online, about some nurse who you know shows up everywhere there is trouble, pulling kids out of rivers, running clinics in places with no electricity." "Ghost nurse," another said. "Saw the clip. Internet loves a mystery." Ward looked at the photograph for a moment longer. "People like you," he said, "get very enamored with machines, and medicine is machines a lot of the time." He turned back to them. "But that night," he went on, "when she stuck her hand into a man's abdomen and found his artery blind, the machines had already quit. It was just skill and a stupid level of refusal to let him go." He was quiet for a second, remembering his own panic on that night, the way he had almost lost the thread. "What I am trying to say," he finished, "is that if you are lucky, technology will back you up. If you are very lucky, you will work with someone like her at least once. Pay attention when you do. It will make you better." In a cramped office in D.C., the sign on the wall over the folding tables no longer read, "Mercer Emergency Aid." The letters had been updated, the logo cleaned up, but the wings remained. Wingline Medical Relief sent small teams instead of big press releases. Their people wore mismatched gear, carried packs into places headlines had forgotten. On a board near Jonah's desk, pins with colored flags marked deployments. He read reports late into the night. 3 volunteers used Mercer protocols to run an ad hoc OR in a school gym after an earthquake in Peru. A nurse in Congo working with nothing but a headlamp and a bag of donated supplies saved an entire village from a waterborne outbreak by following a 2-line note about chlorination. None of the reports mentioned Ava by name. He saw her anyway in the corners. Sometimes when he opened an encrypted inbox that only mattered for one sender, he found a short message. "Jordan Camp Stable, moving on. Flood zone Mindanao contained. Your people did good work in Sudan." He replied with even fewer words, "Stay safe. Proud of them. Keep going." He never asked where she was next. He assumed she already knew. On the anniversary of the Seattle outbreak, the Pentagon held a ceremony that did not appear on any public schedule. The room was smaller this time. Fewer uniforms, more dark suits. A flag at the front, a podium, an arrangement of white flowers. Jonah stood where he had no official reason to be invited quietly by someone who thought conscience should still occasionally sit in the back row. The speaker recounted the basics. A threat contained, lives saved, partnerships between agencies, every sentence scrubbed of the messier parts. When it was his turn, Jonah walked to the podium. The microphone caught the small click as he adjusted it. When Seattle called for help, he said a lot of people answered. Fire police nurses, doctors, techs. People whose names will not sit on these files, but whose work did the real lifting. He did not look at the generals as he spoke. He looked toward the middle rows at the families who had been invited in under the label of stakeholders. There was also one person, he said, who did not answer because of a job description or a rank in a file. She answered because years ago in a place a long way from here, she made a promise to people who did not come home. He let that sit for a breath. You will not see her in any official footage today, he said. You will not hear her name. That is the choice of people who think in terms of assets and risk. He set his hands on the edge of the podium, the knuckles pale. But if you have ever walked into an emergency room at 2 a.m. and seen someone stand between you and something that wanted to wipe you off the map, you have met her in a way. She is the reason more of you are in these seats instead of in the ground. He stepped back. No one applauded right away. Eventually someone started and others followed. In the third row from the back, a woman in a plain dark uniform cap and a surgical mask sat with her hands folded. She stood before the clapping finished and slipped out the side door. Outside, the sky over Virginia was beginning to soften toward dawn. The parking lot still smelled of hot asphalt and last night's rain. An old ambulance waited at the edge of the lot. It was the kind used more now for community events than real calls paint a little faded siren upgraded by volunteers. Ava climbed into the driver's seat. The pendant at her throat swung once and settled. She turned the key. The engine coughed, then caught. Her phone sat in the cup holder. 3 alerts blinked on the screen. Quake in Peru rural clinic requesting emergency support. Cluster of hemorrhagic fever in eastern Congo lab, capacity low. Monsoon flooding in central Vietnam, dozens missing infrastructure damaged. She read them all, her eyes moving over the lines with the same even focus she had used in the lab. The radio mounted under the dashboard hissed and crackled. She tuned past music, past talk, until she found the private channel Jonah had set up long ago, more token than tool now. His voice came through slightly distorted, but clear enough. Echo, if you are out there, he said. They still need you. She smiled small and tired and real. Her fingers brushed the face of the radio, then tightened on the steering wheel. Copy that, she said. The ambulance rolled out of the parking lot and onto the quiet road tires humming over the asphalt. Behind her, the buildings shrank the flags on their poles, catching the early light. Ahead, the highway opened a gray ribbon stretching toward places where sirens already wailed and hands were already not enough. The sun lifted slow and steady, edging gold into the sky. The silver wings at her throat flashed once in the rearview mirror, then settled back against her skin. She drove toward the first call. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.